Welcome back, everyone. I'm Sarah Peck, and this is the Startup Pregnant Podcast. How do you reset for baby number 2 if you had a birth that rocked everything that you thought was going to happen? Well, today, Kari Azuma joins us on the show, and she is 38 weeks pregnant and on the precipice of having baby number 2 at the time of this recording. By the time this interview airs, she will have welcomed her baby into the world, and all the things that are currently up in the air will have maybe landed, and new things will be up in the air because she will be navigating the transition from 1 to 2, which many of us know takes a while and can take a bit of renegotiating, discovery, and all the things that come with the not small process that is being pregnant, giving birth, having a baby, and taking care of a newborn. This world and this walk into motherhood constantly challenges our expectations, our assumptions, and our beliefs. That's what today's episode is all about. Kari shares how she suffered through a traumatic first birth and postpartum time and how she set up her expectations for motherhood in a way that didn't eventually serve her. And her dream of motherhood, something she'd been wanting for much of her life, became, in her words, kind of a nightmare. At the same time, it brought her into what she calls her medicine in the work that she does with mothers. Since she had her first baby, she's been deep in an ongoing study of the expectations we place around motherhood and birth and the transformational journey that is motherhood. Let me tell you a little bit about Kari. Kari has been a coach since 2010, and she works with board members of influential companies and poets and entrepreneurs and other coaches and leaders in the health and wellness sectors. She coaches with author, speaker, and coach Preston Smiles in his popular program, Stretch 22. And after many years of being a coach, in 2015, she shifted her focus to specialize in working with mothers in particular on leadership development, overcoming stress, and dealing with overwhelm through powerful self-realization exercises. She has worked with mothers through social media, private sessions, and she has an elite group coaching model called the Empowered Mothers Alliance. It's not currently live because she is on the precipice of baby number 2, but it is work that she has done for a long time, and she will share some of her work history on this episode. Today, we get to be in conversation with someone at 38 weeks and ask a lot of questions and hear her experience. There isn't one path or one journey of motherhood, as many of you know, especially if you have been a longtime listener of this podcast. And I'm always fascinated by all of the ways we can move through and with and towards all of this transformation that is happening for each of us. So let's dig in. I am so excited that Splendid Spoon is one of our newest sponsors of the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Splendid Spoon. They are a meal delivery service that has been really wonderful during my postpartum time after baby number 2. As you know, one of the things that can be really hard for new moms is finding enough high-quality, good, nutritious, nutrient-dense foods to eat when you're super hungry and you have a new baby in your household. Seriously, for me, I put the baby down, I run to the kitchen, I open my fridge, and then I see that everything I've bought has to be prepared, and I don't even have time to chop things up, let alone like make it to the bathroom, take a shower, whatever all the things are that have to be done. So then I end up opening my cabinet, and on a good day, I'm snacking on seaweed snacks and some salted nuts, but honestly, I grab anything, and then it turns out I've eaten like 5 bags of potato chips that day and nothing else. That's why I was really happy when Splendid Spoon reached out about being a referral partner. They make soups and smoothies that are ready to eat, nutrient-dense, and plant-based. Startup Pregnant listeners get $50 off their first delivery when you use the link splendid.to/startuppregnant. That's splendid.to/startuppregnant. I will put the link in the show notes so that you can get $50 off of your first week of delivery. Welcome to the Startup Pregnant Podcast, where we talk to creative leaders about what it means to be an entrepreneur and a parent. I'm your host, Sarah K. Peck. Kari, I am so excited to have you here today. Hi.
Hi, it's so good to be here with you.
So I want to start with one of my favorite questions. Can you tell us what time you woke up this morning and what the first thing you did was?
Such a funny question, being 38 weeks or almost 38 weeks pregnant. Oh gosh. So what was the question again? I'm just kidding.
What time did you Go ahead. What time did you wake up?
I woke up at 8:30, a luxurious 8:30. That was a treat, with my 3-year-old being watched by my husband. And the first thing I did today was kind of cool. I participate a lot in ceremony, and I've been singing songs to prepare for my birth to connect to sort of the altar of the ceremonies that we sit in. And my little 3-year-old and my husband both sing songs with me. We sing 4 songs, and then we do a prayer together. And it was so sweet. It was just like, it's the way I want to wake up every day, but I can never hold that routine. But today it happened. So that was kind of nice. It's a good day to answer that question.
Oh, that sounds dreamy. What is the ceremony? It's
an ancient teepee ceremony that's kind of in the history of the Huichol people. They do use plant medicine, but it's, we've sat in this, and it's such a beautiful structure of you sit up all night long and pray, and the prayer is for somebody or something. So someone will call a prayer. It's very community oriented, which is very me and my husband. And, it's not like a wild ride or a hallucinogenic anything. It's not like that. It's very gentle. And my kid has been in it with me every time I've done it. I've breastfed through these ceremonies. I kind of became a mother in the teepee. I realized who I was as a mother, because I remember I started when he was 10 months old, and he's still doing them with us now at 3. And I can really just see, a reflection of like how I hold myself in there and how my son holds himself in there in a way that I can't see it in the real world. It's very hard to explain, but when you're staying up all night long from like 9 p.m. to, 9 a.m., or 6 a.m. or however, we stay up kind of pretty much through the whole next middle of the day. We go through this whole portal of just, how do we be with that? How do we sit with the fire? How do we pray? And it's all very based on the elements and the earth. And yeah, I was introduced to these ways when Sitka was about 10 months old. And it really helped me through my postpartum time, because I had so much depression after my first birth. So it really healed me. And so I really, we just returned to those ceremonies like at least 3 times a year, and they really ground me. So I'm really using that as a translation for this next birth I'm having, because I'm having a VBAC at home. And I'm really trying to hold birth as a ceremony this time versus holding it as like, just birth, like this definition of like how it should look based on every voice out there. I'm just really trying to make it my own this time to help me stay, in focus in a different way.
There are so many places I want to take this, because you've just shared so much. First of all, you're 38 weeks pregnant, and you're like on the precipice of birth again. So I want to unpack that as much as you're willing. But I also want to hear more about this ceremony, and I want to hear about your first birth experience. So let me start kind of by taking us back, because I think we'll be able to get to all of these pieces. But I want to take us back, and I would love to have you tell us some of your parenting journey. Where did you start your parenting journey? Did you always know that you wanted to become a parent? What did that look like?
Yes, I always knew I wanted to be a mom. Like from the time I was little, I was always like, it was just me and my sister growing up. I was always the one who was like, there's a baby in the room, give me the baby, And yeah, it was just something like, it was like a birthright to me. I felt like that. I felt so strongly about it. And, I think that was what was so shocking when I became a parent was, I had a very traumatic first birth. I started at home. I transferred to the hospital. I ended up in C-section, it was such a big journey. That could be a whole show. So I don't even know if I need to go too far into that, but
they could all be, right? Like each of these pieces, it's like I could drill down and like peel back the layers, and we could talk just about one single moment in any of these. So yeah, that sounds like that was really traumatic in some ways. Can you give us a sense of it?
Yeah, I think first of all, I was such a different person the first time I gave birth. Because like everything I do with my work and my business and my mission now is all based on that experience, and so that's, I've been a leadership development coach for 8 years and have been in this work for a long time, but I didn't really like get the call of what my actual work was until I became a mom. So like, that's how impactful it was. It was just like, I was such a like, a leadership mindset, and like, I was just such a like go-getter, and like in such a masculine mindset around that too. And I'd been trained by men a lot in this industry. And I mean, one of the best men. I mean, I just love my mentor, Scott Cody. He's amazing. But I was just in that place of like, I can conquer anything. I can, but I didn't realize how much I was living in expectation. And my whole birth kind of became a huge expectation. And I didn't realize it. It kind of snuck up on me. And it wasn't until I was in it it wasn't until much later that I realized this, but that I was kind of in a space of entitlement instead of surrender. And I feel like I just never surrendered. It's kind of the reason I feel like I never progressed, because I just felt like I was just kind of angry and frustrated and fighting pain and just fighting, like swimming upstream the whole time. And also devastated because I just thought I would have this particular, like, the videos, the orgasmic birth videos. Like, I just thought I would have this home birth that was just like so beautiful. And for me, like probably 3 hours in, I remember calling one of my midwives and saying, I already don't think I can do this. Like, I think I just like gave up at that point in a way. So yeah, just as it progressed, it was just like expectation bus after expectation bus, like leaving the house and like not progressing once I was in the hospital for a vaginal birth, even though they were letting me try, and which is rare, then like having to submit to what I called my worst nightmare, which was a C-section. I was like, that's the only thing I don't want for this birth is a C-section. And of course, careful what you pray for, because I was praying to not have that, and that's what I got. So yeah, and then when I came home, it was like I was traumatized by being back in my house. So like, just imagine like bringing your baby home and just like feeling like I'm going back to this place where that feels haunted to me. And I hated being in my room. I hated staring at my birth. Everything reminded me of like the way things went, which was not at all what I had dreamed of. So I felt like my dream of birthing was kind of shattered. But if more than that, I felt like my dream of motherhood had been shattered. And that was the biggest piece that has transformed the work into the work I do now, because I had such a view of what that was supposed to look like. And nobody kind of told me that this is like transformation, honey. Like you don't have control over like how this is going to look. You just get to be on that ride. And I've seen other mothers go through it that way and have such a beautiful experience. And I've seen a lot more mothers go through it my way and be totally traumatized by the transition of their identity. So that's a lot of the work that I do now, is just like, and that's the work I've been doing on myself for the last 3.5 years to just prepare to have this next child.
Yeah. What does that look like now that you're going into a second birth, a second pregnancy, a second birth? Like, how are you holding space for it? And what, if you don't mind me asking, like, what's your emotional state like now, today, these weeks? Because you're so close to another birth.
It's all over the place. I will be honest. Like like 1 minute I'm up, another minute I'm like, whoa. I just wrote a post on social media the other day about, like walking through the shadow places, because I think I've been like strong arming it a little bit. Like, okay, like I can surrender. I can be okay with going to the hospital, having a C-section. I'm doing everything to prepare. I was starting to get in this place of like handling it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was like just still fears lodged in there. And it wasn't until this last week I went back to my OB who delivered my son Sitka, who did the C-section. And she's an amazing, amazing OB, because she is like the VBAC doctor in her area. And she's also very pro vaginal birth. Like, she will save the C-section for the last second. And everything in the hospital system should have told her to give me a C-section when I came in, based on how our hospitals run and the business of birthing. But she was like, nope, I'm going to give you she gave me an entire day. And my water had already broken the day before. So she's amazing. She did everything. But when I went to see her this time, she was definitely supportive of the VBAC, but like just a little on the doctor's side, like, I'm just concerned. I would rather have you in the hospital doing a VBAC, but it's your body, your baby, and like you decide. And it just kind of shook me up. And then I was feeling all this doubt and just like feeling so emotional. I went to go see my midwife right after that. And as soon as I got into her office, I just broke down sobbing and was like, what if I'm making the wrong choice for my baby? Am I in that expectation again, of like, I need birth to go my way to heal? Am I attached to that? Like, those are the questions that are coming up now with the VBAC is like, is my attachment coming back? Am I disguising it as like, no, I'm surrendering and just going to try this out, but actually I really need to have this,
But it's also going to go this way. Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
So there's like a whole level of that. And I really needed to like go there. And she kind of like went through everything. She's like, well, like we don't have to just like change your whole birth plan. We can go to the birth center in between if that makes you feel safe, or if you're stalling, we're not going to wait this time. We're going to go, So she just kind of like helped me with all that. Then the next day it was like, oh my God, the birds are chirping. I feel so light. I'm so ready for this, like, oh, amazing, And then that night I was like, again, like, oh God, so it literally is a moment to moment thing. Just, really being sure. And I think the biggest difference this time, aside from holding it, is like a ceremonial and more surrendered space. And actually, I want to say something about that feels really important to share with other mothers, especially in the spiritual realm. And that is, like I kind of got this message. I had this moment in my first birth where I said, I was kind of angry with like spirit, I was like, I'm just a very spiritual person. And I was just like, where is everyone? Where are my guides? Where are my angels? Where is everyone? Why am I feeling so alone and terrified and in so much pain? And I was angry. Like I was so angry. And I remember being so angry after my birth for so long and having that just stuck in my body. And then I was asking that question recently. I sit in the sweat lodge too. So I did a sweat lodge last Saturday, which was divine. And some people freak out about doing that when you're pregnant, but I love it. I've been doing it for years. And I just kind of got this message of like, like I was never abandoned by spirit. Like I abandoned that trust. Like I abandoned those guides, and that's because I said I was going to take control over all of it by wanting to like make it go my way or fight that pain. And this time I'm realizing, oh, like I wasn't actually surrendered. I was still trying to control so much of it. And funny enough, this is the relationship I have with my son. We're always in a dance of like, he's like, I don't want to be controlled. And I call him my surrender baby because he's seeing and acting out. And I'm just like, okay, like, how can I just let go? And it plays out, really, that the whole birth imprint plays out with us. And this time, one thing I'm doing so differently is I'm really listening to my baby. And like, I've been connecting with her a lot more and just like praying for her instead of myself. And like, like really trusting the wisdom of this baby and saying like, okay, you get to choose your birth. I'll just follow. And that's where I can find the most surrender, So I think that's kind of the difference this time, that I'm actually able to step into this VBAC and like be confident and as much as I can be. And I think I trust myself to be in a mindset of letting go in such a big way because it's the work I've been doing on myself and with other mothers for the last 3 years.
This is so fascinating to me because I know we're done, I'm pretty sure we're done with 2 babies. And yet I would have so many more babies if only just to like go through the fire and learn who I am, because it is so raw and so opening, right? And it's just,
yeah.
And it's not, to me, this is also, I'm just speaking from my experience, but what you're sharing with me reminds me of this. Like, it doesn't go the way we imagine in our heads. It shows us who we actually are. And that can be really brutal to experience sometimes.
Oh, I love how you just said that. That's so right on. Yeah. That's why I feel like I'm such a different person going through this birth. And that is what I'm looking forward to, exactly what you just said. I really can't wait to see who I show up as, however it goes, like, I really want to see like who I am in this. And I think that's such a beautiful part of motherhood and being a mother in business and all of the things. Is like, everything is a mirror for us to just get to see who we're being, how we're showing up. And it's said like the biggest portal, and we've probably done it too as well. And it is, I'm grieving that as well. I'm just like, man, same thing. It's like, I'm never going to be pregnant. I'm going to feel a baby inside here again. I'm not, at least as far as I know.
Right. As far as we know. I want to ask you more about the spirituality side. Where did that first show up in your life? And how have you woven it into your current life as a mother?
Oh, what a great and rich question. Well, I mean, I grew up Catholic, which I'm not, practicing Catholic anymore. But, so I always had some sense of like spirituality from my parents. Catholicism isn't really what I choose anymore, but, I think it did set a nice foundation for just having that extra element of something bigger than myself. But when my dad was, how old was he? I was 16. My dad went out on this Native American tradition called a vision quest. And this is so poignant now because it's so much of the work I'm doing with moms, that how my work has evolved into this. And it's just a rite of passage that, the Native American community, they do this with young boys traditionally, take them out to the wilderness for 4 days, 4 nights, no food, in solitude. And they go to see who they are, be in dialogue with nature, and return with a vision for their people. So my dad did a version of this, which was like blessed by the natives in our area and to somebody who led it, who we really trust. And I was only 16, but I was so fascinated by this process. And this is kind of like what introduced Rites of Passage into my world, which is like my entire, mission right now with mothers is like reigniting what Rite of Passage means in motherhood in Western culture. Because for me, that's like one of the biggest absences of like why women are experiencing so much trauma, so much overwhelm, so much, lack of support, isolation, all those things. Because we're not really giving the time to cross over into the realm of like pausing for this transition. It's such a big transition, as we know. Your whole podcast is based on it. So, I think that it's just huge. And so that's kind of where it was sparked for me. And then I kind of just like, through my 20s, I was always spiritually connected, but never like practicing anything specific. And then when I was 27, I did a vision quest, like my dad, went through the same community. And that changed my entire life. That was just so incredible. It was 3 days, 3 nights for women. And I just had this incredible experience, embodied experience of being out in nature alone, not eating, away from every routine, every voice, every message, and just got very clear on, like who I was. And I just fell in love with these ways. And like, then it kind of sparked my interest for Native American ceremony and their church and their culture. And ever since, I've always been fascinated with it and just kind of gotten deeper into those ways. Like I've attended, supported for Sundance, and I've, sat in Sweat Lodge, and I've done these other ceremonies, and it just really resonates with me. I feel like it's really like what has fed my life so much. So
do you remember why you went on that vision quest when you were 27? What led to that?
Yeah, it's funny. At first, it was kind of like my sister was doing it again. And I was like, maybe this is the year I'll do it. Because I always wanted to do it, but I just didn't have that like big call every year. You have to really be called to do something like that. And I think that year I was just feeling really lost as a woman. I was kind of entering into like what they call the Saturn return, between 27 and 30. And I just kind of like had an inner knowing that like this was the time, and I needed something to mark crossing over into womanhood in a more obvious way. And that's basically, that's why these traditions were created, was to mark a threshold. Hence the name of my retreats that I lead, Thresholds, is the name, because, like those thresholds are so big, and when we make space for them, it really allows us to evolve in a way that's so conscious and so aware of where we're going and what we're committing to in our lives. And then the vision I had come back with from that quest was to be my authentic self and give other people permission to do the same. It was very simple, just that. And I feel like that's followed me into every single thing I've done, even just reporting on my birth journey on social media. I'm just like, I'm posting like the nitty gritty. I'm not really posting like, oh, I'm so happy I'm about to enter into this next baby. I'm like, nope, like I cried all day yesterday, and sometimes I'm really not sure if I can do this again. I really want people to like have all that taboo conversation around motherhood to just, be opened up and cracked open so that they can have that permission to just be like, yes, this is so visceral for me. I get to process this now with you. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I carried it into my work now.
Yeah, so much of your work is about rites of passage and transition, and like you said, your retreats around threshold, this shift. I find it so fascinating that the vision quest that you were called to wasn't about the motherhood rite of passage, but it was about like, what does it mean to become a woman in our society? Like when and where and how do we mark that? And I think there's a difference between, that 18 to to 22-year-old mark, demarcation of college, where a lot of people leave their parents' house for the first time. But then there's like that other marker. What is the late 20s? And what about becoming a mother? And what are the rituals when you don't become a mother? Can you talk about, you have said before that you want to change the conversation of motherhood and the rite of passage. I want to sit here with you for a little bit. Like, what does it mean to change this conversation and look at motherhood as a rite of passage? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, I love this question. And it's always different. The answer is always different. I guess what it means to me is just having more space. I mean, really simply, having more space around getting to process what that transition means for every single woman, but having an expectation, a cultural expectation that we get time to do that. It's like, you've talked about this so much in your podcast, just like how ridiculous basically our maternity leave is, like the space we get, how much that pressure is there to like keep up and not put our business down because, we could get lost in the shuffle or, just kind of that, I feel anyway, like that capitalistic, like go. And, I don't think that's all evil. I don't condemn it. I like feeling that in some ways. I like have a healthy masculine side as well. But for me, it's like, I needed an entire year. I know I had a specific situation where I was in postpartum depression for quite a while, but that was for a reason, like that all happened. I never took medication. I was really not into therapy. I really just needed to ritualize everything. And that's what healed me. And I think that's what was important about my spiritual life the whole way through, even through my 20s. When I left to go to college, my parents ritualized it. They did like a cord cutting ceremony where they like cut the cord with me on a necklace and we each kept part of the necklace. Like that was so special. And I love that my parents set me up that way. They're so amazing that way. I really am grateful for them teaching me ceremony and ritual, because I feel like when mothers cross over that threshold, there's really not very much space for that. There's no one teaching, hey, there's like a lot of ritual, there's a lot of ceremony, there's a lot of space that you can create around setting yourself up for this transition. And I feel like I'm doing that more in this birth, like I'm praying in the morning, singing the songs. I took a whole month off before having the baby this time and just decided to have which is so hard for me, Sarah, but to use like my work time and the babysitting time to just be and really tune into like quieting my mind and things like that, and to make that my new job. That has been so difficult for me because I'm always like, if I have a sitter, I better be working,
Totally. I can imagine how many type A people there are listening to this podcast, or even not even type A, but just go-getters or people who work really hard, right? We have really ambitious people, driven. I like the word driven better than ambitious because no one ever calls a man ambitious. Right. I like the word driven, but it's really hard. I think the harder work, what you're saying, the harder work can be pausing, resting, or doing a little bit less. Like that is, I know for me, I'm raising my hand when you're talking, that is really hard.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with with like having this as a threshold and space around it, is like that being a normal thing for women to say like, oh, I'm going to take the rest time now. And I know, oh God, my pregnant brain's not going to remember her name, but she wrote The Fourth Trimester.
Kimberly Ann Johnson.
Yes. I'm just loving that book. I didn't have it my first pregnancy, but everything she writes, I'm just like, yes. Like, she's talking about, we need time before the baby comes. And these women are working up to like 37, 38 weeks. And it's just impossible to like actually have that space to really put yourself in the pace of what it's actually going to be like to be a mom. And then you get to motherhood and it's like, oh my God, everything's moving so slow and this is so uncomfortable. And how do I cope with like not having purpose? And then you have to go through an extra layer of that on top of caring for a new baby, possibly being depressed, processing your birth, and I just think that these things get to have more of a chance to be spacious and be expressed and have support. Because the only thing I was really finding after my birth was counseling. And I love counseling. There's totally purpose for it. My dad's a therapist. I've been through it. I love it. But I also felt like I need to move through, and this is keeping me in. It's like I need a coach, or I need like something that's going to like move me in action through this. And then that's kind of how all my work was born, because I combined all of the things I had learned from coaching with ceremony, and with pausing. And it was super uncomfortable, but I had to teach all of that to myself. And now I'm practicing it in this particular birth. And I'm trying not to, my mind's already going to like, can I be back to work at the end of July? Can I go back? Like, when can I start posting again? And I'm just like, nope. You said you're going to give yourself through, this many months. Like, it's such a big practice because we're not really given that context. And so, yeah, I'm sure and down the road, I feel like there has to be a book or something more instructional that I'm doing to really teach women how to be in this space, because it's an unlearning and a learning in our culture.
Oh, I love that phrase, the unlearning and the learning. I am like almost lost in a daydream here because of what you said, that even just the space before, so many women are racing up against the clock, finishing everything they can up until 40 weeks one day, 40 weeks 2 days, till the very last second. And then they like shut their laptops or like put their gloves down or whatever they're doing, write their last sentence. And then it's like they think they can go straight to the hospital and just give birth the next day. And the reason for that is because our policies are so abysmal in the United States, where you don't want to take any leave before your baby comes. Most people don't, because we can't afford it. There's no support. But I'm just daydreaming, like, what would it look like for us to ritualize, like, that you stopped working at 36 weeks, period, full stop. And you had 4 weeks to process the fact that you're about to give birth.
Yeah. And I want to be like very candid and real about this. Like, it's been really hard on me and my husband because he's been awesome. Like, he's been like, yeah, I got you. And I see how much he's holding, and he's doing it very gracefully. But there's times where I'm just like, damn, this is like, it's crushing. Cause like, we depend on both incomes, and I just like requested this space, and he wanted to give me this space. He knows how big this birth is for me, but it hasn't been all like, I'm not just like, oh yeah, my husband's watching out for me while I'm on leave. I want people and women to know, like, we really had to organize ourselves around this to make this work. And it hasn't been like a cakewalk. And it's like, we just keep coming back to like, how much can we trust? How much is the reflection of this birth trust? Like the trust we're going into both having this baby in this way, reflecting how we're trusting what's going to show up for us to like pay for it to be this way. And just another example of, like you said, the institutions aren't set up for us to like, like my husband's going to have 2 weeks because he's self-employed of paternity leave. And he's like, maybe I could just fit a client. And he's, it's like, he's already trying to think of ways where it can just be easier. And, we do live in California, which is a very high cost of living and all these things, we're also choosing that. But I think it's just really important for that to be clear, because I think some women could listen to this and be like, oh, well, that must be nice. Her husband can just support her up until the,
totally.
No, but it hasn't been like that.
I'm in fantasy land with you too, but it is like, what if we could daydream that this were a thing that weren't even questioned? Like it was just, this is a place where there's a ritual, there's a rite of passage. What does it look like for you on the other side in terms of changing the conversation of motherhood as a rite of passage in this Western culture? Like, what about post-birth? And you've written before about embracing grief in this transition process. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, this is my favorite conversation. Grief is so huge. Because I think that's why I had postpartum depression, honestly. Like someone told me once, like, this entire 3 years has been the vision quest for you. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. 3 days, 3 nights, 3 years. Like it has been, because I've really had to I had to walk through the grief for a year. Couldn't even work for like the first year. I thought I'd be back after 3 months into coaching. Like that didn't happen. And, again, same thing with my marriage. Like, thank God we have such a solid foundation, my husband and I, because it does test you. I mean, it already tests you to have kids, but just all of those things not set up. But the grief, he felt his own grief too, I think, and the overwhelm. And we lived in survival for so long after Sitka was born. And we've constantly been trying to step out of that consistently, just like practicing that. And the grief has been the biggest catalyst for that. And mostly my grief, because I think there's so much energy a man holds around supporting his wife and her wanting to be happy. And like, that's such a purpose of his and his providing bone. That's kind of when men win, is when their wives are like, yeah, thriving. For at least my husband, that's for sure. So I had to go through a lot of just those processes. And I remember the way I kind of got back into Sweat Lodge was a beautiful friend of mine who's like a sister. She lived with us at the time, her and her now husband. We were living in community with them. And she was like, just come with me to the Sweat Lodge. Come with me to the Sweat Lodge. I was like, no, I don't want to go. I'm too tired. I'm too busy. I was just kind of in my like survival space. And I finally went. One day I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And then I cried for an hour in the dark with these women singing, sweating. And I swear to you, I came out 80% healed from my anxiety. I just needed to be in a womb space with women who weren't expecting me to heal, like, your family, or wanting you to feel better, or you feel like you end up taking care of them because they're worried about you so much. It was just women there, like, just cry, just cry, just be here, just sweat it out, like cleanse. And I wish I'd gone so much sooner. The timing was perfect, but yeah, I think Sitka was 7 months at the time. And I came out and I was like, oh my God, I needed that cry for so long. And it could have been like possible. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with medication. Just want to make that very clear. But it could have been possible that I had gone on medication before that happened and would have never kind of known that that's what I needed, because the conversation about grief is so taboo in this country. It's like, oh, well, you're giving up, or you're weak, or you're too vulnerable, or whatever it is. You're not being that strong mother that you're expecting yourself to be. You're breaking down. There's something wrong. Your kid's not safe. All of those things that go through our head. Mm-hmm. And once I recognized, like, oh my God, like I just needed that cry so badly. Women come to my retreats and they just cry. I'm going to create a context where everyone's going to cry, because they walk out just so healed and cleansed from their tears that they never had permission to really shed, because they're trying to be so strong for themselves and their kids. And what is scarier than guiding a new human being,
Grieving your past self, right? Like, we are never going to be the person we were before. I am on the other side of the second birth. I'm never going to be just the mom to my first son. I now have two. Yep. But even before that, like, I'm still grieving the loss of the self that used to have time in the evenings for not children. There's so much. Oh, I love that you hold space for grief and for a release. There's something so cathartic about having a good cry. And I want to underscore what you said too. Thank you for saying what you said about medication, because it is such an important part of so many people's journeys. And it is also not the entire thing. Like, there's so much more in our culture that we need to look at. And so use everything you can, listeners, that can help you if medication is it. We are warmly and hugely in support of that. And also, Kari, what you're saying is so cool. It's like, I want to go to a sweat lodge and soak it out and sweat it out and cry it out. Like, I feel like I need that today. How do I get there?
Come visit me. I'll take you.
Awesome. I'm like gonna go Google saunas after this conversation, because it sounds so marvelous.
I do love what you said though about, also grieving the past self, because that's so much of the work that I love as well. Is like, and I'm experiencing that right now, like you said. Like, I'm really, really grieving not being just me and Sitka anymore. I feel like he and I are like war buddies, like we went through some really intense things together, and he brought in my medicine, and I never want him to feel like he was the bad birth or any of those things, like he's just such an incredible teacher. And I am feeling sad. I'm already feeling like, he's acting out and having a hard time with this already. And I'm just like, how am I going to show up for him and be here for this girl? And, it's like, so yeah, I think every phase of motherhood deserves that attention.
So what is this retreat threshold like? And when did you start leading these retreats?
Well, I actually started leading them once I got pregnant. I had a dream of doing this. It was interesting because when I started just coaching mothers, I went right to leadership, because I think that's where I was comfortable. And it was wonderful. I had a program called Empowered Mothers Alliance, and I had some really beautiful results of women just feeling really empowered in their story of who they were being in the world and their visions that they were working on, and being mothers at the same time. And I wouldn't allow anyone but mothers in, so that they could be in a context of like, we're working on our futures and we're all moms. So that there was no feeling of like, oh, that person's way ahead, but must be nice because I have to be up with my sick kid all night. Like I felt like that in certain masterminds or things that I did, like, I just can't keep this pace and I feel like a failure. So I wanted women to have that space, and it was beautiful. I did 2 rounds of that. But I knew that there was something more. I knew I wasn't honoring what had actually happened in that tunnel of that year, and that there's something bigger that was being called for me to do. And I wanted to wait till I was pregnant again to do it. I just had this feeling that that was the time. And then I was like, you know what? I'm kind of done with waiting. I just really want to do this work. There's so many women out there who are overwhelmed and traumatized by the transition into motherhood. I want to have the space where I'm in person with women working on this now. And then I got pregnant like 2 weeks later. So that was kind of interesting how that worked out. Once I just surrendered to that, then here came baby 2.
Isn't that so interesting? And what? Keep going.
It's so funny. And, I had planned this huge banner year for my business. I was going to roll out so many programs. And of course, as soon as I got pregnant, it was interesting. Everything I had to drop everything because everything felt so out of alignment with me. I was like, I can't do the leadership work right now. I just can't do it. So I canceled like all these programs that I was going to roll out and just stuck with one-on-one coaching and Threshold. So I did the first one in Australia in November. And this has been such a cool thing because it's kind of been, I birthed this retreat while being pregnant. I've never done this retreat not pregnant. So it's been such a mirror for how I've had to surrender into preparing for this birth too. But at these retreats, they're really deep. They're, it's not for the faint of heart as far as going in there and doing some good hard work. And I follow the Rites of Passage model, which is the way I learned it, is severance is the first stage. So severing to an old self, severing to the life you've lived. And severance can be such a harsh word, but for me, the translation is more like an honoring, like a deep honoring of where you've been, who you've been, loving that woman, really seeing her, giving yourself the time to do that, and then moving forward. And when I did my vision quest, I spent 6 months doing that before I actually went out and did the quest. So it's a really huge piece. And that's a piece that I've been talking about in this podcast that we don't have time for motherhood. Mm-hmm. And we spend the first stage just working on that. We work a lot on trauma, whether it's, life trauma, birth trauma, sexual trauma. It's a big energetic day. We work on lineage healing. So we do a lot of cord cutting with the sort of the traditions that have been handed down to us and the stories about who we need to be as women and mothers, which I find is such a powerful part of the work. And I love it. And it's really I have to have Reiki sessions after because it's a lot of people are giving out so much of what they don't want to carry anymore. So it's a huge day of release. A lot of women who've had birth traumas, or even women who've had a great birth, but just have felt so lost in their identity, they get to just spend an entire day processing, a day and a half really processing that piece. And then once that is cleared, we kind of move on to the next stage, which is threshold. And that's sort of the reclaiming. And we spend an entire day just reclaiming and coming up with these really powerful statements of the visions they're entering into as mothers. And my argument for creating this is that we don't actually have a conscious threshold when we're entering birth into the society. Not always. Some women do. I don't want to make blanket statements. But, in other cultures, they have, midwifery is the standard, right? Mm-hmm. And they have women guiding them into these processes, just like the beautiful way my midwives do. But a lot of women don't have that. So when they cross that threshold, they're catching up to motherhood most of the time instead of, getting to consciously prepare for it and then being with it however it shows up. So I'm giving these women a chance to come back to the threshold and reclaim it now so that they can heal that they didn't get that chance, that they can really take power over that. My commitment in my mission is I'm a commitment to a legacy of empowered mothers leading the next 7 generations. So everything I do, every time I create something, the question is, how do I empower these women? How do they step back into power? So this is the biggest way that I see that the day we do threshold is they claim that, they say where they're going. And then that day is a lot of visioning, dancing, being in their bodies, and a lot of embodied experiences, breath work, and coaching so that it can support them. And then the final day is incorporation. And that's sort of where incorporation in a rite of passage is always the hardest part, they say. Because now you have this beautiful reclaiming, this vision, this work you've done, but you have to integrate it into the world that might not understand what that passage meant for you. So this is where you need the most support. And actually, I think I'm thinking of adding another element to this retreat where I do a post like 3 months with them, because I've felt this has been an experiment. I've just created this. And the last 2 times I've just felt like, man, I don't want to leave these women after this retreat, just like holding this, because they go through such a powerful shift. And then it's like, bye, and we have a group and I keep in touch and I check on people, but it doesn't feel like it's enough. The incorporation to me is like where the rubber meets the road. And that's how you bring that vision and that declaration back to your people, back to your life, back into the integration of the everyday, into your businesses, into the way you work, into the, So that's sort of the outline of the retreat, is just creating that space almost in a retroactive way for mothers so that healing can finally be possible. And then they can move forward in their power in a way that's really healthy and balanced. And I always hate the word balance, but I feel like that actually, it does apply when they can come out of that, because the healing and the transitions have been really looked at. And it's such a beautiful weekend of permission, and I cry most of the time. And, it's such a beautiful thing I love it. And it's, it has been an experiment, and it's been learning. And I did a sweat lodge at the end of this last one, and it was so incredible. And I'll never do it without a sweat lodge again, because I loved it so much. So I'm just giving women these chances to do things that aren't actually really offered in a lot of things that are out there right now. And I do find that the shifts have been really big, and the women have left feeling like they got everything they came for. I just feel like the incorporation piece for me is what I need to work on with women now.
This is so interesting. And I am so appreciative that your work is about like really digging in and opening up and making space for women to have conversations. Like, what does it look like to transition into motherhood? And what you just outlined, I was taking notes, but you were looking at the past self and then dealing with trauma and lineage. Like, that's blowing my mind in terms of even just that section. Reclaiming and incorporation. Each of those things is so huge. And I don't think we have a tremendous amount of language for addressing it as humans. So we walk around all the time, like stuck in past stories or past selves, or even like with the physical manifestations of what my therapist calls little t traumas. Because we haven't even had like the opportunity to shake it out and release and just tell someone the dang story and let it go. Yeah. And so it's all this stuff is like caked onto us that sometimes when I work with people, you can see in a room of people that like half of them, their minds and their bodies and their souls are like halfway out the room because they are so preoccupied with all this clutter in their minds and their bodies, all this detritus, if you will. So the fact that you bring women to a space, a conscious space, and you ask them and allow them to work through stuff. I mean, that work is so powerful. And so, I mean, I think you and I are both on the same page here, but like so desperately needed in this world. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I think also my challenge is to like how to make it a little more bite-sized. Because like, I'm such a Scorpio. I like ran off into the most intense possibility of like this retreat, and now I'm kind of like, okay, how can I make this a little bit like lower ticket? How can I make it more relatable? How can I actually welcome women in this space? Right. So funny. I'm so I'm just so all in that way, but that's me. It will be intense. This is going to be crazy. And you will get what you came for. Exactly. I have experienced a ton of resistance from a lot of women who apply, they're like, yes, and never mind, Right. Too much. Yeah. But the women who get it and the women who say yes, they really get it, and they walk out, they're like, yes, I'm so glad I did that. And so that's kind of my goal too, is just like, this is kind of a big jump, a big leap in my opinion of like how like diving into this level of healing for mothers. Because most of the time it's almost even too shameful to say that there's something going on. So that's the thing I'm really working on is like, where can I really meet women where they're at and just like have compassion for the fact that we're not trained into, this bigger conversation. And like the women I'm on podcasts with like you, Sarah, like, you guys get it. And there's like a bigger leap that's being wanted to take for revolution almost, but
I feel like also like there's just women out there who don't even understand this about that this even happened to them, or they didn't get this opportunity yet. So that's sort of my next, I'm very excited about like when I come back from this maternity leave and just think about like, how could I actually just make this really palatable and really change this conversation in a grassroots way and meet women where they're at.
I am so grateful that you also like just were so forthcoming in this whole episode and transparent about like, this is where my business is and these are what my challenges are. And I'm like right on my own threshold and I haven't figured everything out. I think it's so much almost like more interesting to witness somebody as they're learning and growing in real time than trying to package it all up in a tidy bow and be like, I've figured everything out. Here's how we do business, guys. Got it.
Yeah.
What questions are you currently asking with your life and with your business? Like what's coming up for you over the next year and what can we watch in your journey?
Yeah, great question. Again. Well, one of my like things that I promised myself is I have a lot of ideas of what I want to put out. And I promised myself I wouldn't actually create or act on anything until I had this baby, because I know I'm going to be a different woman on the other side of her coming through. And I know there'll be new things that will emerge, but I do love like the leadership conversation. I just feel like motherhood is the biggest leadership edge ever. And so I want to bring that back into the conversation a little. Like I said, I want to create more palatable things for women to participate in. All my stuff has been really high ticket. So I'm just like, I need to like have something that's like women can just buy and like learn and actually get some amazing value out of, instead of having to like do these big programs or be in these retreats all the time. And that's really where I want to head next, is like creating things for women that feel really resonant and feel like they're helping them on an everyday kind of level first, and then allow them to kind of graduate into, if they want to do some bigger work around their matriarchal journey, which is it's a lifetime journey, And it's funny, it's much harder to enroll women into the conversation of, hey, do you want to work on this lifetime journey of matriarchy? Versus like, hey, do you want to like learn how to start your business in 20 days, or like be a leader and get your vision off the ground? It's a much harder sell, so to speak. So
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, it's so weird to me. But yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm headed next. Like I would love to just write a book or something that's more of a manual of like explaining exactly what this rites of passage world means, because it's really new for most people. And that's the challenge of my work, and like the mission I'm taking on is like, I am just like learning how to walk again after having launched some like pretty like successful things, and I'm starting over with this rites of passage conversation. So it's almost like I've been starting a new business in this last year while I'm pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so I think, my next stages are honestly just to keep learning and keep asking women what they need and keep listening, and then creating something that's really going to meet them where they're at. So, because I've had a lot of women writing me and being like, thank you for saying this, or thank you for sharing your birth journeys. Thank you for talking about VBACs. Thank you for this. And I'm like, okay, I'm just collating all this information of like what's actually supporting women versus going off of like what I think women would benefit from, which I can totally come from that place and be like in my own ego about it and based on my own healings, and I'm really just more interested in like what women really need at this point in our culture to thrive and to be that businesswoman. And the reason I share so candidly is because I have been so in those places, and I'm sure you can relate, and every woman can relate listening to this, of comparing myself to like other women out there who are killing it and like doing motherhood. And I'm just like, man, I just want women to know that like, even if it appears that you're doing great, and I think a lot of women think that when they look at my social media or things I'm launching, I'm still always like learning and stumbling and figuring it out, and going from making a lot of money on this program to making like almost nothing, because I'm so passionate about like, this is where I'm aligned. And I think that's what kind of keeps me satisfied in work and my business, and not burning out or not feeling like, like now I'm a prisoner to like creating these programs or whatever it may be. So I'm just having the courage to start over as many times as I need to like actually get this mission off the ground for women to have this spaciousness. That's really where I'm headed. And I know it's a little vague, but that's what feels exciting and what feels like it's going to be lucrative in every sense of the word for me.
Thank you for bringing us into your mindset and your business approach and your parenting journey. Especially, I know that we were even just trying to get this podcast scheduled right at the precipice of your birth. I'm really grateful for your timing, and for making it work. Oh, my words are starting to slip out of my head now. Where can people find you on the internet and follow your work?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I was actually really excited to do this. I didn't want to wait. You gave me the option. I'm like, no, let's do it now. This is a great, rich time. So you can find me on Instagram at Kari Azuma. Very simple, Kari, which is a different Kari spelling. Azuma is kind of the way it sounds, Azuma. And yeah, and on Facebook, Kari Azuma. That's really where I release a lot of my content, is really on social media and my program launches and stuff like that. My website is kariazuma.com. And I will admit I have to update the offerings on my website, but that's all going to be done soonish. And yeah, I really encourage women just to reach out to me if anyone was touched or like curious about what I'm talking about on this episode. Like, I just love when women actually just reach out on Facebook Messenger or Instagram, or on my website, you can email me or join my newsletter. So right now everything's a little bit on hold, but I will be planning on doing another threshold retreat. My ideal mind says in the fall, but I'm thinking it might actually be next year. We'll see.
I think it'll come roaring out of you. If I know anything about you, it'll be like, not now, not now, not now. I've got a baby. Here it comes. Like,
Exactly.
So we'll be on the lookout for your retreats when you launch them. I'm really fascinated. I can't wait to hear more. And maybe when we're not both like immensely breastfeeding our children round the clock, if that's something you are ending up doing, I'll find you in a sweat lodge somewhere, eh?
Yeah, there are sweat lodges in New York. I can find one if you actually reach out to me, because I know people out there who did ceremonies. So, and just to continue on Rites of Passage really quickly, there are some things that my husband and I are talking about doing together for couples and people raising first-time families and being entrepreneurs. So that's another thing that's actually in my heart that we haven't planned yet, but my husband actually takes men out on vision quest and does a lot of Rite of Passage work and has a podcast called The Rising Man. So he's doing a lot of stuff with men. I'm doing with women. We're like, how can we combine this and really make this powerful for men and women to experience together? Because the gap can be so big when people do transition and threshold work alone and their partner's not in it. So we're also looking toward that. So that's something I just want to put out there as well.
So important. And probably I'll have you back in a couple years because that's another huge conversation. Everyone, if you enjoyed that interview as much as I did, I want to take just a minute to tell you about a couple of episodes that you might also enjoy. Go back through our archives and take a look for episode number 104. We talked to Vanessa Van Edwards, who is the best-selling author of the book Captivate, all about her experience transitioning to motherhood and those first few weeks of parenting and what nobody tells you. That's episode number 104. You can find our episodes by going into your browser and typing startuppregnant.com/104 for the episode number, and it'll take you right there. I also think you might enjoy episode 94 with Kimberly Ann Johnson, who is the author of The Fourth Trimester, who also talks about this journey into the postpartum period and new motherhood. And if you want to hear my story a little bit more, I recorded a series of episodes with Carrie Fortin on my journey into having a second baby. And I recorded the experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, the uncertain, the confusing, the overwhelming, all of them in a series of episodes in the 80s. So check out episode number 81, where we talk about what it's like to talk about the really hard things. And episode number 86, where we talk about how I prepared for maternity leave and how she prepared for maternity leave, because that is a particularly challenging puzzle for new entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs in a country that doesn't have much in the way of maternity leave policy or protection. So the episodes that I recommend you go check out are 81, 86, 94, and 104. If you are a longtime listener and you've been listening to them straight through, then I will see you on the next episode. But if you are new here, you can find the links in your podcast show notes. You can type them into your browser, just startuppregnant.com/the episode number. And they're always 3 digits. So it's 001 or 002 or 104. I knew that we would get to at least 100 episodes. I do not know if we will get to 1,000 episodes. That seems daunting right now, but we will see. Or you can just scroll through and search on your podcast player for these episodes. The episode numbers are in the show notes, and you can find them if you scroll through. And I always say this, and I mean it. Leave us a review on iTunes if you like our show. It takes a few seconds, and it really does help us a lot. If you want more of what we're talking about, go over to startuppregnant.com and get on our email list. We send out a weekly newsletter with time-saving tips for parents and entrepreneurs. And I always include a weekly gadget or tool or something awesome that we've stumbled upon to help make your life just a little bit easier. And as always, you can reach out to us at hello@startuppregnant.com. We love hearing from you.